We are gathered here to fill you with fear and give you a treat for your ears as we invade your mind with our scary rhymes and some tales that can be gory. As you bear witness and sit here and listen to our poetic horror stories. My name is Megan. I'm 19 years old, and today is my grandmother's funeral. My grandmother passed away a few days ago. It was so sudden. Her death caught me totally off guard. I just can't believe that she's gone. My grandmother was my best friend. We were closer than two peas in a pod. In her eyes, I was an angel. I could do no wrong. As long as I can remember, she has always been there. She was my greatest source of inspiration. She was to me a symbol of strength, especially when my father abandoned me and my mom when I was 6. One day, he just vanished. I remembered him and my mom arguing. Then he left and never came back. My grandmother never really liked my father. She never thought he was good enough to be with my mother. She used to tell my mother he was nothing but trouble. So when he left, my grandmother was happy. She said to my mother,
"I knew one day he was going to leave and break your heart, just like your father. He was never good enough for you. Tell you the truth, I'm glad he's gone. Good riddance."
But this made my mother furious with my grandmother because she loved my father. This wasn't what she wanted to hear. So she didn't see or speak to my grandmother for over a year after he disappeared. But times became hard after my father left, and my mom couldn't keep up with the young kid, bills, and rent. My mom had no choice. She needed my grandmother's help, and my grandmother gladly took us both in. My mom and grandmother always had issues with one another. They never really got along. But on the other hand, my mom and my grandfather were close. My mom was Daddy's little girl. My grandfather was my mom's whole world. But just like my father, my grandfather also left and disappeared. Bizarre, I know. The police never found any trace of him. It's like he vanished into thin air. As a child, my mom lost the most important man in her life, and after that, my mom and grandmother never saw eye to eye. Then to have this happen to my father. To my mother, something about this was suspicious and didn't make any sense. But my mom felt like my grandmother had something to do with my grandfather's and father's disappearing. That she had a hand in getting rid of both of them. And my mom was right. Because what my grandmother did left me and my mom bewildered, hurt, and speechless. My grandmother wasn't nice and sweet like I thought she was. No, my grandmother was truly evil. She was a gaslighting, manipulating, narcissistic bitch when she revealed her real intentions. This is just a friendly reminder to please like and comment to let us know how we are doing so far. We would love to hear from you all. And if you're new, please subscribe and become a part of the PHS crew. And we thank you. My grandmother bequeathed her estate to my mom and me. Yes, my grandmother had lots of money. This is the main reason why my grandmother didn't like my father. She thought he only married my mother for her money. She never believed he truly loved her. But we will revisit that topic later. My grandmother lived in a big 12-acre estate in a gated community. Her house was a mansion. To me, when I was young, it was a palace, and my grandmother always called me her little princess. My grandmother had a whole room dedicated to her clothes and shoes. She called it her vanity room. In this room, this is where she stored and displayed her jewelry, her makeup, her racks of clothing and shoes. It looked like a well-to-do, expensive, high-end department store. It was incredible. That's where we would spend a lot of our time together. She would do my hair and give me makeup lessons. I remember vividly a mirror that my grandmother kept hidden away in a corner, and she kept it covered. Whenever I asked her about the mirror, she would always change the subject. As time went on, I didn't think about the mirror anymore. Now that my grandmother is gone, my mom wanted to donate some of my grandmother's things we couldn't use and want. My mom was taken by surprise. She had never seen the mirror before. She wondered why my grandmother had it hidden away and covered in the closet. My mom took the cover off the mirror, and we were both floored. The mirror looked ancient. It looked very old. The mirror had these weird hieroglyphics surrounding and embedded into the frame. The hieroglyphics were deeply ingrained. The mirror looked out of place and bizarre. It had a strange aura. Me and my mom just stood there for a moment, just looking into the mirror. My mom told me she didn't like it. She wanted it to go. But I told my mother, no, I want to keep it. I thought it was beautiful. I told my mom I was going to keep it and move it into my bedroom. I felt like this is what my grandmother would have wanted me to do. So, the next day, my mom had the mover move the mirror into the corner of my bedroom. It didn't go with the decor of my room, but I still liked the way it looked. That night, when I went to bed, I jumped up suddenly from a disturbing nightmare. I had a dream that a man was staring at me from the other side of the mirror, but the man had no face. It had been erased. I quickly turned on my lights to ensure that no one was there, but all I could see was me staring at myself. I was too afraid and upset to turn out the lights and go back to sleep, so I stayed up the rest of the night till the next morning. For the rest of the day, I walked around in a daze. I was dragging and shuffling my feet. It felt like I was a zombie. For the rest of the week, I kept having that same dream. I was exhausted. I finally told my mom what I was experiencing. I told her, I keep dreaming of a man with no face standing and watching me from the mirror. My mom told me that was it. She wanted the mirror gone. She was going to call the mover to come back and remove the mirror tomorrow. I totally agree. I hope once it's gone, I can finally get some sleep. After me and my mom had breakfast, we continued going through the remainder of my grandmother's things in my grandmother's vanity room. That's when we discovered an old, ancient-looking book. In the book had the same hieroglyphics along its spine. The same hieroglyphics, just like the frame on the mirror. My mom opened the book and flipped through the pages, but she couldn't read them, because it was in a different language. Then she noticed in the back of the book an envelope that was addressed to her. It was a letter from my grandmother. My mom said, "I wonder what this is about." I told my mom there was only one way to find out. So we took a seat in my grandmother's vanity room, and I listened as my mom began to read.
My dearest daughter, I see you found my letter, which means I have now passed on to the great beyond. I know that you and I have never gotten along, but you are all I ever wished for. When I was young, I always wanted a pretty little girl. I could dress up just like a pretty little doll, and the best part, she would be all mine. But you and me, we could never really see eye to eye, no matter how hard I tried. You most definitely was your father's daughter. Both of you were so strong-willed and just plain stubborn. Just like him, you always had to have your way. Or it was no way. No matter what I said, you only would listen to your dad. have to admit, I was quite a bit jealous of yours and his relationship. You seem to love him more even though I gave you everything you asked for. And this is why I did what I did, and I don't have any regrets. But I feel the need to let you know this. The day your father went missing, he asked me for a divorce, and he wanted full custody of you. Of course, I didn't approve and I refused. I wasn't going to let him have you. This is where this ancient book and mirror comes in. I would do anything to stop him. This book and mirror is an Egyptian relic. I won it in a black market auction. When it arrived, your father thought it was weird. But I knew what this mirror could do, and what I planned to use it for. The language in the book is Sumerian, and I quickly learned how to translate it. The day he disappeared while you were at school, me and your father had a big argument. I remember that I was so upset. All I could see was the color red. Your father followed me into my vanity room, where I kept the mirror. As we argued, he stood in front of the mirror. I thought to myself this was my chance, so I started to chant. Of course he didn't understand, but I did. Then I said the incantation out loud, and the symbol on the mirror started to glow. Suddenly, out of the mirror, a mummy-wrapped demon grabbed your father and pulled him into the mirror. Just like that, he was gone. He was no more. It happened so fast, I didn't even feel bad. I didn't feel any remorse. I told the police he just left after our argument, but I knew he was trapped inside the mirror. To tell you the truth, I was relieved, because I knew he never really loved me. He was just here for my money. But I was happy, because now you only belong to me. I knew you would be upset, but with time you would get over him, and you did. It didn't bring us any closer, but it was okay. Until you found a man just like your father. When you two started to date, I knew he was going to be a problem. I thought to myself, it's okay. He is just a phase. You will get tired of him, and eventually he will go away. But that didn't happen. Instead, you two eloped, and to my dismay, he got you pregnant. Just blasphemous. It filled me with disgust. You couldn't see it, but he was never good enough for you. I knew you could do better. He trapped you in a loveless marriage to ensure he could get his hands on your money. I know that day when he also disappeared, that you and him got into an argument because of the ultimatum I given to you. I was going to cut you out of my will if you didn't leave him. He didn't like the fact that I threatened you, and you begged him not to come over to my home and confront me. That you didn't care and didn't need my money. At least, that is what he told me. You told him that I have always been controlling. There was nothing he could say to make the situation better. You were right. He should have listened. He promised you that he wouldn't come and talk to me, but he did the very next day. That was a big mistake. He was so cocky and so brazen, so I made him an offer. I wrote him a nice fat check and out. It was for a really big amount, but he told me he wouldn't ever leave you and his little girl for any amount of money in the world. He told me I can keep my money. Then he turned to leave. I had to stop him, because I knew when he got home, he would tell you everything. And I knew you wouldn't ever see or speak to me again. How I hated that man. So I pretended to trip over my rug and fall down onto the floor. I told him I think I sprained my ankle. He couldn't just leave me there, of course. Not if he was truly a gentleman. He picked me up and he carried me to my vanity room. I needed to get him in front of the mirror. And once he stood there, I started to chant. Then out loud, I said incantation. And again, the mummy-wrapped demon came out of the mirror and grabbed and dragged him in. Good riddance. After that, the mirror stayed in the corner covered up. Again, I knew you would be upset, and I knew you weren't happy with the words I said after he disappeared. That he never loved you anyway. It hurt me when you left, but I knew eventually you would come back. In the end, it was worth it. I got to spend the rest of my time with you. Oh yeah, and that brat. I know that this letter probably has you upset, knowing now the truth of what happened to your father and your husband. But cheer up, my dear. There is a way for you to get one of them back. You can make a bargain with the demon in the mirror, if you're willing to trade your daughter. So, who do you love more is the question. Your father, your husband, or your daughter?